As each piece of cloth from both of us fell to the ground, I had to exclaim in admiration at the mature yet ageless masterpiece of Violet. My fingers slid down from her cheeks to the valley between her breasts. Violet's breathing became more rapid than ever. Hello everyone, welcome to our channel, where we will bring you the most interesting and dramatic stories in life. It will take the audience from one surprise to another. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. In today's video, we will bring you the story Mrs. Violet's Rejuvenation through Jane's voice. Please watch. Violet is 45 years old this year, the age of rejuvenation. She looks full of vitality. Her husband died early, leaving her alone with her daughter. Her daughter is in her final year of university, and Violet lives alone at home in a house with fields and gardens. Her house is spacious and airy with a very large garden and a high fence. Before her husband passed away, he left a large amount of property, enough for her and her daughter to live well for the rest of their lives. Therefore, she does not have to work hard, so her skin is white and rosy. Violet often practices Zumba, so her body looks slim. Her youthful style of dress makes her look much younger than her real age. She does not want to remarry, does not have an affair with anyone, and rarely leaves the house. She mainly stays in the house surrounded by those walls. Violet had a special hobby. Every time she finished dinner, she would sleep in the hammock on the porch. It was shady, covered with trees, and during the hot summer, it was the perfect place to relax. Sometimes she would sleep there, not wanting to go inside, because it was much cooler out there than inside. One evening after dinner, Violet lay back down on the hammock on the porch. The wind blew gently through the trees, carrying the scent of flowers and grass. Violet sighed, feeling the relaxation spread throughout her body. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift off to sleep. My name is Henry, 25 years old, single and working as a computer repairman. I rent a relatively large house to practice my profession, and my income is also stable. I like to exercise, so my body is considered healthy. The house I rented is right next to Mrs. Violet's house. One time when I went to the back of the house, I saw a lost shoe of mine on a pile of bricks. I climbed up to get it down. When I got there, I suddenly saw Mrs. Violet lying on a hammock on the porch. Her direction was facing my eyes. The distance was probably about 30 meters. It was a bit dark at that time, but there was light from the lamp so I could see very clearly. Mrs. Violet was dressed quite coolly. Those hills made my heart flutter. At that moment, I was like hypnotized, no longer in the mood to pay attention to anything else. While I was absorbed in admiring the scenery, I was startled because someone came to ask to fix the computer. I suddenly jumped down under the pile of bricks, quickly walked into the house, but my heart was pounding. That feeling of agitation and confusion did not easily disappear, and from then on the image of Mrs. Violet always appeared in my mind. That night, after witnessing that beautiful scene, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Mrs. Violet's beautiful hills appeared in my mind, making my heart flutter. I tossed and turned in bed, my emotions surging uncontrollably. I had loved a girl before. She was my first love, and also the first person to make me know the sweet taste of love and physical intimacy. We had beautiful memories, but at that time I was still in school. Finances were tight and difficult. After graduating, she went abroad and got married, always living and working there. From then on, I didn't want to think about girls anymore, even though I knew the sweet feeling of it. But tonight, the image of Mrs. Violet lying on the hammock, the charm emanating from every line of her body, aroused my manhood. I couldn't deny that the feeling was intense, making my heart flutter and yearn. I got up, turned on the light, and went out to the balcony to breathe in the fresh air. It was late at night. The moonlight was dimly shining on the garden, creating a peaceful yet captivating scene. I stood there looking towards Mrs. Violet's house, wondering if she was dreaming sweet dreams like I had dreamed about my first love. The next morning I decided to get up early and jog around the neighbourhood to clear away the mixed emotions in my heart. As I passed Mrs. Violet's house, I couldn't help but glance into her yard. Mrs. Violet was watering the plants, looking relaxed and fresh. She was wearing a thin shirt and shorts that highlighted her attractive curves. When she saw me, she smiled and said, "Hello, Henry, jogging this early?" I forced a smile and replied, "Yes, hello, Ms. Hong. Do you wake up early to take care of the bonsai?" "Yes, I like gardening in the morning. The air is fresh and cool." "You should also enjoy the morning air. It's very good for your health." "Yes, thank you, I will try." The short conversation made me feel closer to Mrs. Violet. Images from last night flooded my mind again, but I tried to stay calm and not show my emotions. After the conversation with Mrs. Violet, I couldn't get her image out of my head. Her alluring figure and grace made me feel more attracted than ever. Every time I saw her, I felt a strong desire to possess her body. When I got home, I sat on the couch, my mind racing with mixed thoughts and emotions. I knew that this was wrong, that I should not let these guilty feelings control me. But the more I tried to block out the images and feelings, the clearer and stronger they became. I couldn't sleep the next night. The image of Violet lying in the hammock, her perfect curves and her salty beauty appeared in my mind every time I closed my eyes. I wondered how I could possess her body, how I could satisfy the burning desire in my heart. The next morning I started to carry out a plan. I wanted to get closer to her. I got up early, jogged past Mrs. Violet's house and pretended to run into her. She was still watering the plants, looking elegant and fresh. Seeing me, she smiled. "Hello, Henry. Are you back from exercise?" "Yes. You just got back. Do you need any help?" Mrs. Violet looked at me a little surprised, but then nodded. "Thank you. If you don't mind, please help me water the plants in the back." I was happy inside, quickly picked up the water hose and started to help her water the plants. We chatted happily, and I felt like Mrs. Violet also had some sympathy for me. In the following days, I continuously tried to approach and help Mrs. Violet. I fixed broken things in her house, helped her take care of her garden, and occasionally brought small gifts to show my concern. Mrs. Violet trusted and liked me more and more. I understood more and more about Mrs. Violet's personality and habits. She was a strong, capable woman, but also very lonely. After her husband passed away, she became introverted and had little contact with outsiders, but she really loved those who truly cared for and helped her. That's why I knew I had an advantage, and that made me even more determined in my plan. One day, while I was searching for information online, I came across an extremely impressive advertisement. Elixir helps people fall asleep quickly, has no side effects, helps insomniacs improve memory, good for health. I was delighted. This was exactly what I needed at the moment. I immediately ordered a few bottles, full of hope for its effects. As for Mrs. Violet, she grew fonder of me. Whenever something broke and needed fixing, I always helped her enthusiastically. Gradually, she developed a better impression of me than before. Sometimes she thought that having a son like me in the house was a good thing. That thought made her smile, and she felt an indescribable feeling in her heart, like joy mixed with a little excitement. The next day I received the package containing the medicine. Holding the medicine in my hand, I felt my heart beating fast, both excited and nervous. I knew I was on a dangerous path, but that strong feeling made me more determined. The next evening, the weather was cool and pleasant. I decided to go to Mrs. Violet's house to play, holding 2 bottles of medicine that I had ordered in advance, full of plans. I rang the gate bell and waited for Mrs. Violet to open the door. When Mrs. Violet came out to greet me, I smiled friendly. "Hello, I brought you 2 bottles of sleep-improving medicine today. I saw that you haven't been sleeping much lately, so I thought this medicine would help you improve your sleep. It's good for your health." Mrs. Violet looked at me with gratitude and joy. "Oh, thank you so much, Henry. You always care about me. I'll try it." I was secretly happy when Mrs. Violet took the 2 bottles of medicine. The conversation was quick and light. Then I returned home, feeling excited because my plan was progressing as planned. When I got home, I showered and had dinner, but my mind was still on Violet and what might happen if she took the medicine. I knew I was on a dangerous path, but I couldn't stop. I felt nervous and anxious for the results. At night, I kept thinking about Violet, the grateful look in her eyes as she took the medicine from me. The image of her charming and friendly appearance appeared clearly in my mind. I told myself that I was getting closer to my goal and that with a little more patience I could achieve it. At around 10 p.m, after everything had quieted down, I decided to proceed with the next step of my plan. I walked down the back path of my house, climbed up the pile of bricks, and looked over to Violet's house. In the dim light of the lamp, I saw Violet lying asleep on the hammock on the porch, looking very quiet and peaceful. I watched for about 15 minutes to make sure she had fallen into a deep sleep. My heart was pounding. I was nervous and worried, but also excited. I knew that the medicine had worked and what I had been waiting for had come. I boldly climbed over the fence into the garden, following the rows of trees to get closer to where Violet was lying. When I got closer, I could see her entire body clearly. In the dim light, she lay very still, her lips slightly parted, her breathing steady. In the dim light, I could see Mrs. Violet more clearly than ever. Her alluring and graceful figure made me yearn even more. Step by step, I approached her carefully and slowly. Mrs. Violet was still unaware. My heart was pounding, my mind full of conflict. I knew that what I was about to do was wrong, but I couldn't resist the strong attraction of the woman before me. I bent down to look at her delicate face. Every feature on her face was perfect, her skin smooth and bright. I felt mesmerized by her beauty. My trembling hands lightly touched Mrs. Violet's arm. Her soft and warm skin gave me an electric shock. She was still sleeping soundly, completely unaware. I knew I had to be careful and quick. I decided to boldly move closer. At first, I didn't dare to use too much force, just gently touched the places I loved the most. Mrs. Violet didn't make any strange movements, only her breathing became a little faster. This made me even more confident. This medicine is really good. I did it without her knowing anything. I continued to take off the entangled things. Everything went very smoothly. I sat down on the hammock. That feeling was so wonderful. I closed my eyes and enjoyed it while she lay still. Her breathing suddenly became more rapid than ever. I tried to do it as quickly as possible. When I reached the climax, I braced myself, not daring to open my mouth. The feeling was so sublime, a feeling that I hadn't experienced for a long time. It was so intense and burning. When I finished, when I had fully experienced the magical moment, I quickly stood up, cleaned up the battlefield, so that when she woke up, she wouldn't discover anything strange. I returned home with a smile on my face. The feeling of possession was so comfortable. I thought about it and quickly fell asleep. As for Mrs. Violet, while she was sleeping, she had a strange dream. She hadn't had that feeling for so many years, but today she had it so clearly, so real, that she didn't think it was just a dream. When she woke up, it was already dawn, feeling comfortable and at ease. That dream made her nervous. That liquid kept flowing out. She immediately went into the bathroom to wash up, her heart still filled with mixed emotions. The next day, the morning light shone through the cracks in the windows, making everything around me brighter. I woke up in a good mood, feeling satisfied with my achievement. In my mind, the image of Mrs. Violet and the pleasures I had experienced were still clear, making me feel happy and satisfied. I quickly finished breakfast and finished my work. My emotions were really excited at this time. My mouth hummed a cheerful song that I really liked. My movements became cheerful and energetic, as if everything was supporting me. As for Mrs. Violet, when she woke up in the morning, her body still retained the feeling of floating from last night's dream. Her breathing was still rapid, and she felt a strange and incomprehensible feeling in her heart. She washed her face and prepared breakfast with a confused and uncertain mood. Mrs. Violet sat by the window, looking out at the large garden in a dreamy mood. The fresh and peaceful morning air could not make her forget that emotional dream. She wondered why she had such strong feelings and why it was so real. In her heart, a fire of desire began to burn silently. The feeling she had in the dream was not just temporary pleasure, but also the awakening of long-suppressed desires. She could not understand the reason, but could not deny that the feeling made her feel a new desire. She thought about the years that had passed, the years without a man by her side, the years living alone in the big house. She remembered the loneliness and the hidden desires in her heart. That evening, the air was fresh and quiet in Violet's house. The light from the garden lamps reflected on the ground, creating long, soft shadows. Violet had just finished dinner, and her mood today was still filled with an indescribable feeling of unfamiliarity. Violet picked up the medicine bottle, feeling the drops of medicine glisten under the light. She opened the bottle and looked inside, seeing the clear amber liquid. With a deep breath, she poured the medicine into her mouth. The sweet taste of the medicine slid across her tongue. A sweet and cool feeling. Spread from the throat down to the abdomen, and feel the relaxation immediately. The refreshing feeling slowly spread throughout the body. Late at night, when everything was quiet, I continued to step over the fence into Mrs. Violet's garden. The night covered everything, only the dim light from the lamps lit up the path. I felt nervous and expectant, knowing that tonight would be a wonderful night as I had imagined. When I approached Mrs. Violet, I saw her sleeping soundly on the hammock, her body still gently swaying in the light breeze. The scene before my eyes was so seductive that I could not take my eyes off her. This time I was bolder than the last time. I moved forward to act faster and more accurately. I wrapped myself around that body, using all the tricks I had learned before. I just followed my breaths. The space at that moment became extremely magical and passionate. Mrs. Violet still lay in a deep sleep. Her feelings in her dreams continued to pursue feelings that she had never dared to dream of. The intensity made her feel a new revival in her soul. When I finished what I wanted, I quickly packed up everything, leaving no trace for Mrs. Violet. I returned home feeling satisfied and content. It was such a wonderful feeling. The next day, Mrs. Violet woke up with a strange and intense feeling. Her body felt refreshed and full of energy. The feeling from the dream was not just a memory, but also a part of reality. She went to the bathroom, washed her face, and felt a revival in her body. When she sat down to eat breakfast, she felt like she was standing between two worlds. One side was the peaceful reality. The other side was the intense and stimulating emotions from the dream. The confusion in her heart kept rising, and she felt like she was standing on the threshold of new and attractive feelings. That day I did not go to Violet's house as usual. I felt the need to keep a little distance to avoid arousing her suspicion. Even without my presence, the evening passed as usual, nothing special. The next day, Violet woke up with a feeling of loss. The magical feeling she had experienced in her dream seemed to have disappeared. She felt an emptiness in her heart, as if a part of her had been taken away. Was that feeling just a dream? She wondered. The loss made her feel lost in her own emotions. Every time she thought about the feeling from that night, she felt a strong desire like a fire that never stopped burning in her heart. The following nights, Violet tried to recapture the feeling from the dream. She tried many ways to awaken her emotions, but all were ineffective. The longing in her heart grew stronger and stronger. She felt as if she was missing an important part of her life. "Am I missing something?" she wondered. Her body was always burning like fire. She walked in and out of the house, full of anxiety and worry, not knowing what to do to get rid of this longing feeling. After a week of sensory deprivation, Violet suddenly remembered something. That's right, that elixir, that's it. Memories of the intense sensations from the elixir resurfaced in her mind. She immediately decided to find a way to get rid of this craving. "I have to find that young man, ask him to buy me more medicine," she thought. The intense sensation from the dream made her unable to wait any longer. Violet quickly went to my house to find an excuse to see me. She tactfully said that an electrical appliance in the house was broken and asked me to come fix it. When I arrived at her house, she smiled and invited me in. "My dear, actually nothing is broken," she began, "but can you help me buy the medicine you gave me the other day?" I smiled, knowing that she had begun to crave those medicine bottles. "Of course. How many do you need?" I asked, feeling happy that my plan had worked. I went home and took out a pack of 6 potions that I had prepared in advance. These potions contained the ingredients needed to create the feeling that Violet desired. I carefully wrapped them and took them to Violet's house. When I handed the pill to Violet, her eyes sparkled. "Thank you so much," she said, the joy in her voice unmistakable. That evening, Violet returned to the craving she had been enduring for the past week. She couldn't wait any longer, her heart filled with anticipation for the feeling the elixir would bring. Violet sat in the living room, glancing at the pill on the table. She took a bottle and drank it, the sweet sensation sliding down her throat, making her feel more relaxed. "I hope tonight will be like the other nights," she thought, her heart filled with hope and longing. When Mrs. Violet was fast asleep, I sneaked into her garden like the previous nights. The night was dark all around, but the excitement and anticipation in me made this night special. I approached Mrs. Violet, who was lying peacefully in a deep sleep. The scene before me was as alluring as the previous nights. I slowly approached Mrs. Violet, gently touched her body and began to act. I felt her softness and allure. This feeling made me feel excited. I slowly moved along with Mrs. Violet's breathing. A feeling of pleasure and intensity filled my heart. Every time I touched that ecstasy, I felt like I was flying on the wonderful emotions of the world. Every push of me, every movement of the hammock became part of this feeling of enjoyment. The night became romantic and full of emotions, creating an unforgettable experience. When I reached the peak of my feelings, I quickly packed up and left her house. Violet woke up in the morning feeling refreshed and energized. The lingering feeling from last night's dream returned, making her feel satisfied and happy. Violet continued her life with a new and intense feeling. The feelings had opened a new door in her life, and she felt she was facing an opportunity to explore things she had never dared to dream of before. It had been 2 days since Violet had received the elixir from me. During that time, she had been living in that insatiable desire. Violet sat at the table staring at the bottle of elixir. Memories of the intense and burning sensation from her dreams replayed in her mind. She wondered why she could feel that way every time she took the medicine. Was it only the medicine that brought that feeling? She thought. That night, Violet decided not to take the medicine and see what would happen. She wanted to find out where the magical feeling she had experienced really came from. She got up and decided to go out into the yard, where the hammock always waited for her every night. "Maybe I need to try feeling the truth again," she muttered, her heart filled with excitement and curiosity. As night fell, Violet lay on the hammock, closing her eyes to feel the quiet of the evening. The sounds of the night echoed in the air. She listened to the rustling of the wind and the rustling of the trees in the garden. But then she began to hear small noises from the garden, the sounds coming from the young man's house. Violet still pretended to close her eyes. Her heart beat faster as the noises got closer. "I'm coming to you," a familiar voice said. It was the voice of the young man next door. Violet recognized it immediately and felt a surge of excitement in her heart. Every movement of the young man was gentle and experienced. He was so smooth, without any hesitation. Violet closed her eyes tightly, feeling every movement. The intense and ecstatic feelings she had experienced in her dreams were now present before her eyes. When the young man hugged Mrs. Violet, she felt the sweetness from his body. "This is the feeling. It's the same in dreams," she thought. The presence of the young man made her understand the reason for the realistic dreams. Before, when the young man hugged her body and closed his eyes to enjoy, Mrs. Violet suddenly wrapped her arms around him tightly. Her unexpected action made the young man ecstatic. He looked at her with a confused gaze, not knowing what to say. Time seemed to stop in the dim light. The two looked at each other in silence. The young man wanted to open his mouth to explain, but Mrs. Violet blocked him with a passionate kiss. For the first time, he felt the sincerity and intensity from Mrs. Violet. Her lips lightly brushed against his, and he received the kiss with enthusiasm, without any hesitation. The kiss lasted. The two of them entwined, leading each other to the 9th cloud. This feeling was no longer just a dream. It had become reality. The sublimation and emotions between the two people became more and more intense. Both of them no longer cared about anything other than the current feeling. The emotions of Mrs. Violet and the young man were intertwined. After enjoying the intense moment, Violet and I did not say much. I quietly left her house, walking down the familiar path to return. My back gradually disappeared, but Violet's eyes still followed me. Her heart was filled with new and intense emotions. My footsteps stopped on the narrow path, and I slowly turned back to look at Violet again. She stood at the door, her face radiant and her eyes sparkling with satisfaction. Those dreams and emotions still lingered in her like a gentle wind, carrying away her dreams and desires. The next morning, the light of dawn shone through the window, casting warm streaks of light across my room. I woke up early, the cheerful and happy mood from last night still lingering in my heart. Thinking about Grandma Violet and what we had experienced made me feel light and content. Just as I was about to leave the house, Grandma Violet appeared at the door. Like a breeze carrying fresh emotions, she smiled at me. Her smile was not simply a thank you, but contained something deeper. "My dear," Mrs. Violet spoke softly, her voice filled with tenderness and warmth. "Please get me some more bottles of elixir today." We stood looking at each other for a long moment, without needing to say anything more. In Mrs. Violet's eyes and mine there was understanding. Her simple words opened new doors in our relationship, and I knew that we would have many things to share in the future. "Of course, Ma'am," I smiled back at Mrs. Violet. "I will bring you the medicine right away." And so, every time Mrs. Violet needed me, I had the opportunity to come to her, to relieve the stress of both of us. But I didn't know how long those days would last, so whatever. Let's just go with the flow. Ladies and gentlemen, our story will stop here. Hopefully, it has brought you the most interesting and wonderful emotions. If you find this story interesting, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment about your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next interesting stories. And now Jane would like to say goodbye. See you again in the next videos. Wish you a wonderful evening,